I'm going to age myself a little bit here, but those of you that grew up in the 90s, you watched the WWF, the WWE. It was way more popular then. And arguably the greatest time in wrestling was Monday Night Wars. Kevin Nash and Scott Hall formed the NWO, and for weeks it was, who is the third member? Who is the third member of this NWO invading WCW? Is it another WWF superstar? Who is it? And then Hulk Hogan has the greatest heel turn of all time, being that third member of the NWO. And yeah, it's one of those you had to be there moments, right? You had to be outside at that time, man. But they'll never recapture that. Heading into this Warrior season, I thought I'd propose the three biggest questions. And I think the first one is, who is that fifth member of the starting five? Who is that fifth guy that's going to be closing games? Now, we understand Steve is going to experiment to start the season. What he can't do is have a 12-man rotation into December like he did last season. It might have even been longer than December. It took Steph low-key having to call him out. I remember because I was at the game in Phoenix out here when we took another L, and Steph post-game was like, yeah, I mean, Steve, like, all right, like enough experimenting, enough tinkering, right? And so we've got the four starters penciled in. And again, maybe it's not about who's starting, but more so who's closing. But I think that the odds-on favorite right now to be that fifth guy is Brandon Pajemski. You heard Steve Curry yesterday say that he's who stood out in the first day of scrimmage. You know, he went out of his way to maybe set that up. Pods might be the fifth starter, right? And, you know, look, I don't think you can let how the season ended leave a sour taste in your mouth about Pods. Steph goes down, you know, he got put into another role, chipped up. Everyone is at that time of the year, and it ended ugly. But again, don't let that make you forget the final month of the regular season and that Rockets series where he looked like he had taken a step. The mid-ranger started to show up, and offensively things were clicking, you know, and it looked like he was going to take a step, but it all fell apart in that Minnesota series for a lot of guys, right? And, you know, he has an off-season surgery on his left wrist. I think Pods is a shooter. He's proving that. But when you're a shooter who does dirty work, it's not going to be there as consistently as a guy who just likes to stay clean and pretty, spot up in the corner. Like there's going to be bigger peaks and valleys with his shooting. But I think that we're going to see more of that mid-range game that frankly, I didn't think it was coming. Just with his shot mechanics, he didn't like to elevate when he got to the nail, and all of a sudden it was there, right? Year 3 in this system. And then you look at the intangibles. Pods believes. You know he's going to put in the work. You know he's a hard worker. He didn't get to the NBA. You're not a 6'4" white kid and make it to the NBA without hard work. Let's be honest, right? But he's going to work hard, but he believes. He carries himself like a star. And that's a big part of it. Listen, you got to have opportunity, right? You got to have the talent. I don't want to take away from that, but there's a manifestation, I think, with Pods and how he carries himself. Like, I'm a guy. I believe I'm going to be on the Olympic team, right? And so I think right now, B Pods is the odds-on favorite to be that fifth guy starting. Closing, we'll see. I think next up would be Moses, who very similarly to Pods had a really rough end to the season in the playoffs. He got icy cold. What was it? Was it a thumb injury? He had a hand injury as well, which may explain, you know, how poorly he shot. But what happened for Mo was it got in his head mentally. The fact that his hand was hurt or that he was in a shooting slump, it affected the rest of his game to the point where, you know, Kerr couldn't play him in that Minnesota series as nearly as much as they would have liked to, and even in that Houston series. But Moses, you know, he's going to continue to steady Eddie. He's going to continue to add little wrinkles to his game and grow here in year 5 for Mo. And I think last year he started for a good portion of the year, right? And was it when Jimmy came over that he really unlocked as the starting 2 guard? I can't remember the exact timetable of it, but he took most of his steps last season defensively. He figured out that his length and his hands, his distance management can make up for a lack of foot speed. And you saw him start to disrupt dribblers, reaching, poking, prodding at the ball, breaking the rhythm of the ball handlers from a distance they weren't accustomed to because of that wingspan. And so he's like, all right, I may not be the quickest guy laterally, but I can disrupt with my length and in that way with my good hands. And so he took a step defensively. Offensively, we've talked about the dip and the shot windows. Hopefully with a healthy hand, he's going to make, when he gets open good looks, he's going to make enough of them, right? But I think the question is, can he adapt his jumper to shoot it quicker when there's tighter windows, when it's playoff time, and when the offense hasn't generated, a wide open look? And then you have the vets where, look, we know GP2 can and will close some games dependent on a matchup, right? You're playing Minnesota and ants going off. Whenever there is a guy that we need a point of attack guy to shut down towards the end of the game and the offense is flowing enough, GP2 could close and will close some of these games. D'Anthony Melton. I really like that they released the news this week that he's not going to play till December because we're coming up here on a year from the ACL, right? And you've seen that now. In 2025, the consensus is, hey, take at least a full year when you have an ACL so you can get the leg firing, get your strength, your confidence, everything back. But I like them bringing him along slowly, and because that's the name of the game with Melton, is the durability and making this a marathon, not a sprint, and have his health throughout the year. So once Melton, is healthy and reacclimated to playing basketball, we know, like, talent-wise, there's a good chance that he becomes that guy, right? Like, in an ideal world, I won't say that. I think in an ideal world, it's Pods or Moses because of the investment in their youth for them to step into that role and really snatch it. But there's a world where Melton becomes that fifth, not just starter, but closer. But again, Steve, we get you're going to tinker here in month one. That's it. You've got 1 month to tinker, and then you kind of got to lock in here. And that's the thing when you look at the depth of this team, he's going to tinker. But we can't have a 12-man rotation. It's funny because it goes against actually, his principles of chemistry. It ruins it, right? I get everyone, you want to give everyone an opportunity, and there's a lot of guys on this roster that deserve one. So it's going to be a tough job for Steve to, I think, go against his instincts of tinkering with these rotations so much. That brings me to the second biggest question going into the season. Is this Steve Kerr's final year as the Warriors coach? He's in a contract year. I got a quote for you. I love my job. I love what I'm doing every day. Can't wait to get in the building. Hopefully I'm here for another few years, but I think it makes sense for the organization and for me just to see where this thing is at the end of the year, where they are, where I am. Hopefully that means we run it back. We keep going with this group, and that'd be awesome. Now, traditionally in sports, you don't want a lame duck coach, right? Like, that's a thing. That's a phrase because it kind of takes the power away from them, their voice in the locker room, their authority when the players know, like, you about to be out of here next year, right? Like, I ain't really got to listen to you. But in this instance, in this context, I actually like it because Steve doesn't have that problem, right? Like, Steve, he's not a lame duck coach because of what he's done for this organization and how long he's been here and who's still on the roster, right? Steph still gives him that power. Draymond, I don't have to explain it to you, right? And so, I think it may motivate him. Does it give him an added sense of urgency? Because make no mistake about it, you don't have 9 rings without being an elite competitor, whether that's as a player or as a coach. And so I think it will bring out the competitive juices in Steve. And I think it works fine. There's a lot of scenarios where you don't want that. This fits fine, and I think he understands that. But I think the question I would have is, what end result warrants him getting an extension? Another second round exit, and he gets the extension. We get knocked out in the play-in. Is that it for Steve? Or maybe, they're just Steph and Draymond are just like, no. Steph pulls a power play regardless of the outcome of the season. And it's like, nope, you need to bring him back until I'm out of here. Because let's not kid ourselves. He could do that. Would he? I don't know. Again, we got to wait and see. But I like where that stands. I like the answer. And I'm curious to see if he has a little more urgency, a little more fire this season, being the competitor that he is. Question number 3, it's got to be Kuminga, right? It's got to be Kuminga. Does he buy in, right? Does he buy in? Rebound and rotate. I think that should be the mantra for Kuminga this year. When you talk about rebounding, listen, it's habitual. It is a mindset. It's effort. It's want. Right? We can use all the cliches that you throw out there in sports, but it really, like when you look at, you think Looney thinks about getting a rebound? You think Pods thinks before he crashes the offensive glass? No, it's programmed in. It's a habit that they've created where it's just instinctual. And so Kuminga's got to flip that mindset into going to the glass every time. He doesn't got to think about it. It's not a decision. It's just part of his game. Now, can he do that at this stage in his career, going in, what are we, year 5? It's crazy, right? I don't know. He's only 22, right? I think the argument that can be made for Kuminga and his potential is that, you know, he got a late start and he is still so young. Now, boxing out, I think what could really help him in all aspects of the game, defensively and rebounding, is I'd love to see him sink his hips a little bit. You know, he plays very high and upright, and he's got such a quick second jump. You look at his physical attributes and you understand, even if he doesn't have great technique, if he has enough want, he should be able to be a pretty good above average rebounder. But if he played lower, sunk his hips, I think, one, it would keep him out of foul trouble. When you look at Kuminga and his fouls, a lot of them have to do with him trying to gain positioning using his upper body rather than his hips and his legs. So if he could just technique-wise get wider and lower, I think that could help with box outs and be part of that, right? But rebounding, obviously, that's something that Kerr's been begging for him to do his entire career. And then rotating. I don't think Kuminga's ever going to be an ideal point of attack defender. Now, there's going to be some matchups that are, hey, it works. Look at him. He's giving him trouble, right? But, he just doesn't instinctually have the feel of the distance management and the angles, And again, could he learn it? Now, that one I'm writing off. I think that happens much earlier. You kind of have that or you don't. And I don't see that from him. But that doesn't mean he can't be a good team defender. And that's where the rotate comes in. Rotate on time and in the right place. You know how quick he is off the floor and how explosive and twitchy he is. He could be a really great connecting team defender and at times be on the ball, like hold his own. But I think rebounding and rotating is what's going to get him on the floor and keep him on the floor. And the scoring will take care of itself so long as he gets that opportunity. But those are the two things he needs to do to get that opportunity. Now, as the season kicks off here Sunday with the Lakers preseason game, I highly encourage you to check out my Patreon. It's as little as $2 a month. What you're going to get is a quarter-by-quarter breakdown over highlights. You're not going to see my face, and I tell the story of the game. We get an intro, starting lineups. We're going to talk X's and O's. We're going to show lowlights. It's easy to get the Steph barrage and find that highlight anywhere. We're going to talk about, hey, what about the Quentin Post minutes? Look at this new set for Pajemski. We're going to get into the details. We're going to tell the story and break it down in case you've missed the game. And then, being on Patreon, there's some things that I can't say or don't want to say on YouTube that I'll get off on these highlights and have some fun, add some entertainment value and some comedy. So I'll put that link in the description. I'm going to try this QR code here. You can scan that, but it is the best way to support the channel. And you won't regret it. I'm really proud of that work. And again, my Patreon breakdowns of every Warriors game all season long, as well as extra content. Now, I'm going to sneak in a little bit of W talk because, if I make its own separate video, let's be honest, the views and it's not even about adding views to another video. It's about getting people interested in getting people to understand that these W playoffs have been lit, man. It's been, you guys don't know what you're missing out. You're missing out on fun. Nafisa Collier calls out the commissioner, Kathy Engelberg. Is her name Kathy Engelberg? I took a couple notes here. Engelbert. Okay. So I think it's important to understand who Kathy is. She was a walk-on at Lehigh and became a captain. Okay. So she played ball and then she became the first woman CEO of a Big Four firm. And you look at this profile, all her family, a bunch of brothers and siblings, they all played sports. And you look at someone who did that, right? And you'd say, okay, she seems like a cutthroat businesswoman, right? Like a bottom line numbers businesswoman. I think she's really good at that. But when you're talking about the commissioner of a sports league, it's more about marketing. It's more about building relationships. You've got lawyers and number crunchers that those are a dime a dozen. How do you represent the league and how do you communicate with the players in that relationship? And that's where she's failed. And Nafisa Collier calling her out, like that is the equivalent of like Steph doing that to Adam Silver. You're talking about like a top 3 player in the league who is kind of the golden child of the league. And so she's up out of there. They got to get her up out of there. They really do. But the money stuff and talking about like, they can't afford a lockout here. I don't know the details of that, but what I do know is what I watched this season in the on-court basketball play as far as the refereeing goes. If you go back to, when the Valkyries inaugural season, like the first 2 weeks of covering, I'm like, yo, the refs are crazy bad. They're really bad. What I'll say out of the gate, I'll frame that with the women's game is more difficult to referee because it's ground-based. It's not based on verticality. And that's why you see a lot of the players carry a little more weight because it's not about elevating in verticality. When there is a drive downhill, when there's going to be a contest at the rim, the ball handler, the offensive player isn't trying to elevate over and finish up above the rim, right? And so a lot of the time, they're going full speed to the basket. There's no slowdown, where in the men's game, I'm not saying this is all the time, like Ja and some of these guys, Giannis will go full speed and just try to blam on somebody. But generally speaking, in the men's game, when they're in that scenario, there's a guy rotating at the rim and here comes a guy downhill at the rim, there's a deceleration in order to elevate and control your body in the air. There isn't that nearly as much in the women's game. And so it leads to these ground-based collisions at the rim that are just harder to referee, right? The other aspect of the physicality is when you look at the NBA, there is kind of an unwritten rule like, hey, we're all millionaires here. Let's not get too crazy, at least in the regular season. Like, let's not dive at each other's legs for the ball. Let's not like run through screens like football players, because again, we're all, unwritten agreement. In W, there isn't that. Because of the lack of opportunity, because of the lack of pay, it's just there on a nightly basis, you'll see players make a conscious decision. I am running through her body full speed. And so it is what it is. And again, this is as unsafe as it is highly entertaining, the physicality. The other thing that I would say, if we're talking about rules and reffing that I would like to see cleaned up is now what I would like to see cleaned up specifically in my first season covering it with like a hawk eye. In the post, 2 hands on the offensive player. They let that happen way too much. Aaliyah Boston, I'm talking about you. Not to mention your elbow and hooking. But like they allow the post defender to put 2 hands on the offensive post player way too much. It's just like, that's objectively a foul. The other thing that I would say is they allow too much physicality in the backcourt picking up the ball. Like if they're trying to press or they're picking up at midcourt, for whatever reason, like outside of the 3-point line, like 30 feet and out and in the backcourt, I think they allow the defender too much physicality. They allow him to impede the path of the ball handler, and there's just a lot of contact that way. I think those are 2 areas I'd highlight to clean up. But they got to get her up out of there, and the game's going to be tougher to referee. I heard Lisa Leslie make a really good point about the refereeing. Because these referees, they're trying to use the W as a stepping stone to the NBA, and they get rotated out. They don't stay for long. They don't know the KYP. You talk about players knowing other players know the personnel, right? They don't know the tendencies of these players. and what players are capable of. And so that leads to more air. But yeah, someone had asked me in the comments my thoughts on that. I thought I'd give them. As far as the finals go here, I've got the Phoenix Mercury. I said at the beginning, and again, these playoffs have been amazing. These playoffs have been amazing. Parlaying W playoffs is peak betting, and I don't even have a sponsor for you on that, but I'm just saying, I've had a blast. I said at the beginning of the playoffs in my playoff prediction video that at some point here, it feels like the Aces are going to run out of gas. The push they had to make to get to that 2 seed the final month of the season, I just felt like, all right, at some point they're going to have to pay the piper for it. And it felt like it was going to be against that Fever team. That Fever team has to be one of the toughest basketball teams or resilient basketball teams I've ever seen. It was incredible how they hung in there to that Game 5. But I think that ultimately you're going to see Las Vegas pay the cost in these finals. Schematically speaking, Satou Sabally should be able to pull A'ja Wilson out of the paint. She truly is a unicorn offensively, and she's really, I think, made the jump into superstardom in these playoffs. She's shown me she is who she says she is, right? And then Jackie Young, I'm assuming they're going to put on Alyssa Thomas. Well, that's not true. Maybe they put Nalissa Smith. A lot of teams have been putting 5s on her, but I think that they're gonna have to use multiple defenders on Alyssa Thomas, and that's the thing. Like, Jackie Young has been amazing. She really saved him in that Game 5, but they ask her to score so much offensively. Defensively, AT punishes you for defending her, right? Any opportunity to dole out punishment and physicality, AT is gonna do it. And so I think that whoever you ask to guard her, you have to understand that that's gonna be a cost to the game. And then the point guard, Chelsea Gray, finally looked healthy on the back end of this season. And I think she was a big part of, the push, the run that they made, along with Nalissa Smith and bringing her in. But she rolled the ankle bad in that Game 5, if you watched that in Las Vegas. And so, she already has feet issues, right? She walks like a auntie, you know what I mean? So I don't think she's going to be at 100%. So the question to me would be, can Dana Evans be the X factor for the Aces? She's been explosive off the bench. There may be times where she's the better matchup, but overall, I think it's the Mercury's year. Really completely unexpected. And that's what's been fun with these W playoffs and in their games in general. It's far more unexpected outcomes than in the NBA that's more predictable. Again, I almost relate it to the NFL. You see that Niner game last night? That was... I know I'm jumping subjects here, but that was one of the craziest football games I've ever seen. I mean, but anyway, I digress. Back to the W, the unpredictability of the W, the physicality, the off-court drama and storylines. It's must-see TV. Y'all are missing out. But I got the Mercury winning this championship here. It's a 7-game series, so health will always play a part. It ain't gonna be a short series. But I got the Mercury getting it done, and Alyssa Thomas, her crowning moment here in year 12? Satou breaking out into superstardom, and Ka Copper, maybe a second finals MVP. Y'all enjoy the weekend. Hit that like, share, and subscribe. I'm out, y'all.